Have you ever wondered what would happen if an entire civilization devoted itself, completely, obsessively, and unwaveringly, not to life but to death, not as an end, but as a doorway? Imagine a culture that built its greatest wonders not for kings or conquests, but for the soul's journey beyond the veil. A civilization that poured its highest wisdom, its deepest science, and its most sacred rituals into the question, what lies after this life? This is the enigma of ancient Egypt. To modern eyes, it seems puzzling. Colossal pyramids that rise like stairways to the stars, labyrinthine tombs painted with spells and secrets, mummified bodies wrapped in ceremony and gold, all to preserve a fleeting human form. But the Egyptians were not preserving the body. They were preserving consciousness. They did not worship death. They revered what comes after it. To them, death was not a darkness to be feared, but a passage to be prepared for, a sacred test, more important than anything in this life. And if you failed, you were not simply buried. You were lost eternally, in a dimension of chaos, your soul devoured by the jaws of the underworld. In today's world, the afterlife is often seen as a mystery, or even a myth. But to the ancient Egyptians, it was a science, a sacred journey with maps, methods, guardians, and gateways. In this video, we will dive into the heart of that obsession. We'll explore the hidden wisdom behind Egypt's rituals of death, uncover the spiritual meaning of mummification, and reveal what the Book of the Dead truly teaches about consciousness and the soul's path. We'll journey into the myths of Osiris and Anubis, explore the weighing of the heart, and decode why the pharaohs built their legacy in stone, not for glory, but for transcendence. Because once you understand why ancient Egypt obsessed over the afterlife, you may begin to question how we have forgotten it. To understand why the ancient Egyptians were so deeply invested in the afterlife, we must first shift our perception. In their worldview, life and death were not opposites. They were two currents in the same river, interwoven, inseparable, and flowing toward a singular, spiritual destination. Unlike modern secular thought, which often places consciousness as a byproduct of the brain, the Egyptians saw the soul, or Ba, as eternal. Life on earth was merely one chapter in a far longer journey. Death, to them, was not a conclusion but a transformation, a return, a great migration of the soul through dimensions far more real than the material world. This belief wasn't merely symbolic, it was systemic. It permeated everything, from architecture to agriculture, governance to art. The Nile itself was more than a river. It mirrored the celestial river of the heavens, the Milky Way, reminding them daily that life flowed from above, and to above it must return. Central to this understanding was the myth of Osiris, the god of resurrection. According to legend, Osiris was betrayed and dismembered by his brother Set, scattered across the land of Egypt. His devoted wife, Isis, reassembled his body and resurrected him through love and magic. Osiris then became lord of the underworld, not in punishment, but in power. He ruled not the damned, but the transitioning souls. In essence, Osiris became the archetype of eternal life through death. This myth wasn't just a story, it was a metaphysical blueprint. Osiris represented the soul's journey, fragmentation, death, reassembly, rebirth. Every Egyptian hoped to follow this path, to be resurrected through righteousness, to become an Osiris in their own right. Then there is the Book of the Dead, a modern name for what the Egyptians called the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It's not a book of doom or superstition. It's a manual for ascension, a compilation of spells, affirmations, and consciousness technologies designed to guide the soul through the perils of the afterlife, past serpents, judges, and chaotic forces, to the field of reeds, a paradise for the awakened. Every image inscribed on tomb walls, every sacred item placed in a burial chamber, every prayer whispered by priests, all of it was part of a vast, sacred science, not of death, but of immortality. Even the act of mummification wasn't about preserving flesh, it was about preserving form. The Egyptians believed that the soul returned to the body to resurrect before moving on. The more intact the body, the more seamless the transition. It was less about vanity, more about metaphysical mechanics. And who guided the soul in this passage? Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and protector of the dead. With black skin representing regeneration, he led the departed through the veil, weighing their heart against the feather of Ma'at, truth and divine balance. This too was not poetic metaphor. The Egyptians believed the heart contained the record of your actions, your thoughts, your intentions. If your heart was heavier than truth, you would be consumed by Ammit, the soul eater, a final death. But if it was light, you passed on to eternal life. This was their spiritual justice system, more profound than mere law. It was cosmic alignment. So when we speak of Egypt's obsession with the afterlife, we are not speaking of death fear. We are speaking of death mastery, of a culture that encoded its highest knowledge into stone and ritual, not to delay death, but to transcend it. To the ancient Egyptian mind, physical death was merely the first veil, the doorway to a much greater initiation. What followed was not an end, but a test, a trial, a cosmic process of purification and remembrance. They believed the soul was composed of multiple aspects, not just a single spirit floating off into heaven. In fact, they divided the soul into at least 5 major parts, each playing a unique role in the afterlife journey. Ka, the life force, the energetic double of the person. It remained in the tomb and required offerings. Ba, the personality or individuality of the soul, the part that could move between realms. Ak, the fully realized, transfigured spirit, the radiant being that emerges after successful navigation of the afterlife. Sheut, the shadow, linked to memory and legacy. Ren, the true name, the essence of identity. If forgotten, the soul could dissolve. This complex soul anatomy wasn't superstition. It was a technology of consciousness, a layered map of what we now might call multidimensional identity. The Egyptians were not simply preparing for death, they were training for transformation. They knew that the untrained soul could become lost in the astral realms, devoured by illusion, or trapped in lower densities. But the prepared soul could navigate the psychic labyrinth of the afterlife with awareness, clarity, and strength. This journey wasn't automatic. It was a series of initiations. The soul would face beings, symbols, and archetypes, each representing psychological and spiritual truths. Serpents of chaos, guardians of sacred gates, the 42 assessors of Ma'at. Each demanded not blind belief, but deep internal harmony. The weighing of the heart, for example, was not just an external judgment, it was an inner alchemy. The heart was a symbol for your true essence, your accumulated emotional resonance. It had to be lighter than a feather, not because you never made mistakes, but because you learned, released, evolved. This is why purity mattered so much. Why the pharaohs and initiates practiced moral codes, sacred rituals, and meditative techniques. They weren't just obeying gods. They were sculpting their energy field, preparing their soul to be recognized by the cosmos. And this brings us to the pyramid texts, the oldest known religious writings on Earth. Found inscribed in the chambers of pyramids, these texts are not tales of power, but manuals for ascension. They describe the soul transforming into a star, ascending through the celestial gates, merging with the divine. The pyramids themselves weren't simply tombs. They were machines for resurrection. Their shape, geometry, orientation, all aligned with stellar constellations, especially Orion and Sirius, linked to Osiris and Isis. The Great Pyramid wasn't just a monument, it was a gateway, a literal launchpad for the soul. Their architecture encoded harmonics, the sacred science of sound and vibration. Ancient chants, spoken in resonance within the chambers, activated energy fields. It's as if the Egyptians knew that vibration was the language of the soul. Even their understanding of time was different. They didn't view time as linear, but cyclical. Life, death, rebirth, each part of a cosmic rhythm. To them, preparing for death was not morbid, it was wise. Because to die well was to be reborn well. Their entire civilization, from the grand temples of Karnak to the simple amulets worn by farmers, was structured around a single idea: the soul survives, and its journey beyond this life is the most important journey of all. This is why the afterlife wasn't a concept, it was a curriculum, one they studied, practiced, and mastered for thousands of years. In modern times, we often separate religion from science, myth from reality, spirit from body. But for the ancient Egyptians, these distinctions didn't exist. The seen and unseen worlds were intertwined, two halves of one mirror. Their obsession with the afterlife wasn't rooted in fear of death, but in alignment with cosmic law. They believed that the universe was governed by Ma'at, a principle more profound than mere morality. Ma'at represented balance, truth, harmony, and the divine order of all things. To live in accordance with Ma'at was to live in tune with the cosmic heartbeat. Every thought, word, and action had weight, energetic weight, and in the afterlife, that weight would be measured. That's why the Book of the Dead, which they actually called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, was not a book of superstition, but a guidebook for navigating consciousness beyond the body. It offered mantras, passwords, visualizations, and symbolic teachings to help the soul pass through each stage of the journey. And those stages were intricate. The soul was said to pass through Duat, the underworld, not a place of punishment, but of profound inner testing. There, the soul encountered both light and shadow, reflections of itself. Each deity in the afterlife wasn't just a god to be worshipped. These were archetypal forces, mirrors of the psyche. Osiris, the god of the dead, represented spiritual resurrection and divine kingship. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide, symbolized the guardian of thresholds, he who protects the transition between realms. The gods were not above the people, they were within them. They were blueprints of divine aspects waiting to be awakened in the soul. Even rituals of mummification were more than preservation of the body. They were symbolic initiations. The removal of organs, the wrapping of the body, the placement of amulets, each had encoded meaning. The heart was preserved, the brain was discarded. Why? Because the heart was seen as the seat of wisdom and memory, not the intellect but the essence. And consider this, every part of their funerary process was a form of energy manipulation. The use of sacred oils, the recitation of incantations, the specific orientation of the tomb, they were engineering the soul's successful exit. Now here's a hidden layer that few discuss. The Egyptian afterlife journey mirrors the process of initiation in the mystery schools. In those secret chambers beneath the temples, initiates would undergo simulated death, entombed in darkness, submerged in silence, brought face to face with their fears and illusions. Why? Because to conquer death, one had to die before dying, to realize that the body may perish but consciousness endures. This is the hidden root of their obsession. It wasn't death they fixated on, it was liberation, and that obsession touched every corner of Egyptian life. Their art was not decorative, it was magic in form. Hieroglyphs were living symbols, designed to encode and transmit spiritual power. Their architecture wasn't merely impressive, it was built with sacred geometry, aligning earthly structures with celestial truths. Even their economy revolved around the afterlife. Tomb construction, amulet crafting, priesthood services, and funerary rites were major industries, not to glorify wealth, but to empower the soul's voyage. In truth, the Egyptian civilization wasn't obsessed with the afterlife. They were obsessed with eternity and how to consciously navigate it. They didn't see life as a linear span between birth and death, but as a spiral journey, an eternal return through which the soul evolves, lifetime after lifetime. And what's even more fascinating, much of this wisdom has echoes in other traditions. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo teachings, the Greek Eleusinian mysteries, even certain Gnostic and early Christian texts. All of them speak of the soul's passage through realms of testing, light, and memory. But the Egyptians, perhaps more than any other culture, built their entire civilization as a temple of initiation, an earthly mirror of the soul's celestial ascent. They remind us that death is not the opposite of life, it's part of its rhythm. A doorway, a mirror in which we discover who we truly are. It's easy to look at ancient Egypt and see only mythology, ritual, and grandeur. But behind the symbolism lies a system of conscious living, a way of aligning yourself with the eternal, right here and now. The first principle we can extract is this: live as if your soul is being weighed every day. The famous image of the heart being weighed against the feather of Maat wasn't just a post-mortem fantasy. It was a reminder that your thoughts, your actions, your emotions all carry energetic consequences. To the Egyptians, the heart was not just a pump of blood. It was a spiritual ledger, recording the truth of your life. Ask yourself, are your actions aligned with your higher self? Are your thoughts light or heavy with fear, judgment, and distraction? Would your heart pass the test if it were weighed today? A simple daily practice. At night, before you sleep, review your day as if you were judging your own soul. What moments were filled with light? Where did you stray from truth, from balance, from compassion? This is not to shame yourself, but to purify. This nightly reflection is a modern echo of the Egyptian judgment, a spiritual hygiene that keeps your consciousness sharp. Second, invoke the power of ritual in your life. You don't need golden sarcophagi or sacred oils. Ritual is intention made physical. Light a candle with purpose. Clean your space as if preparing a sacred tomb. Speak affirmations aloud as if they were spells calling your soul forward. In Egyptian thought, the spoken word had creative power, known as Heka. Words were not casual. They were tools to shape reality. So when you speak, speak consciously. Name your intentions. Create through vibration. Third, embrace symbolic death. This may sound strange, but the mystery schools knew something we've forgotten. To grow spiritually, you must be willing to die before you die. This doesn't mean physical death, it means ego death, letting go of identities that no longer serve you, letting parts of yourself die so that something more awakened can be reborn. Here's a practice. Set aside time each week to enter stillness. Turn off distractions. Lie down. Visualize your body dissolving. Let go of your name, your age, your story. Ask yourself, who am I if all of this disappears? This meditation mirrors the underworld journey of the soul, facing the void, not with fear, but with curiosity. And often, what emerges is a deeper sense of truth, of self, of eternal awareness. Lastly, remember this: the Egyptians built temples of stone to reflect the temples within. You are a walking temple. Your body, your thoughts, your heart, they are sacred spaces, so treat them as such. Walk with reverence, speak with intention, reflect with courage, and live as if death is not an end, but a return. The obsession of ancient Egypt wasn't really with death at all, it was with conscious transformation. And that is something we can all strive for, here and now. So, why did ancient Egypt obsess over the afterlife? It wasn't just about tombs and treasures or gods and judgment, it was about transformation. A sacred roadmap for the soul, reminding every human being that this life is preparation for the next, and that death is not the end, but a passage into deeper reality. The pyramids weren't just monuments to kings. They were living metaphors, chiseled into stone, pointing to the journey of every soul, to rise from ignorance to awareness, from chaos to order, from the illusion of the material to the truth of the eternal. We saw how their rituals, myths, and monuments were all designed to train consciousness, to awaken it, purify it, and prepare it to pass through the veils of illusion. But here's the secret: the afterlife they spoke of begins now. Every thought, every decision, every moment of stillness or distraction, that is your spiritual preparation. You are already shaping your journey beyond this life through how you live this one. The heart you carry is being weighed, not someday, but now. And that truth is not meant to instill fear, but to awaken purpose. So light the inner lamp, walk your path with presence, and live as the ancients intended, not as a body fearing death, but as a soul remembering eternity. If this message stirred something within you, don't let it fade. Take time today to reflect, to practice, to step into your own sacred journey. And if you feel called to explore more forgotten wisdom, more hidden teachings, this channel is your temple. Subscribe, share this with a fellow seeker, and continue walking the path. Because the mysteries were never lost. They were simply waiting for someone ready to remember.